Jeff Zito, and thanks for listening to another episode of Celebrity Jobber, where we talk to celebrities. Maybe they're stand-up comedians or movie stars. Have I had a movie star yet? Maybe somewhat. A lot of musicians. And, if they didn't get their big break, who knows? They might be in a completely different occupation. And boy, oh boy, I had no idea that our next guest could have been a few different things. And, a lot of guys that you talk to, they're all in. They were all in on what it was they wanted to become, and it was just balls to the wall. They didn't have a backup plan. Well, our next guest, he had a backup plan. Man, he had a lot of backup plans and kind of an incredible story. And we have a lot in common, to be honest with you. Would you think that I would have a lot in common with the lead singer of a pretty famous metal band? Pretty famous or really famous? My good friend Todd LaTorre, the lead singer of the band Queensryche, is our guest this week on Celebrity Jobber. All right, Todd, Happy New Year, man. Good to see you.
2023.
How about that? And you're back from a big tour with Judas Priest.
Yeah, we did 2 tours with them last year, which was perfect coming out of COVID.
Yeah. I
mean, people were just scrambling for work. As you know, a lot of venues closed and due to the pandemic. And then everybody that does tour, it's time to go work and make a living, right? So to come out of that onto a great North American tour with Judas Priest, and then we did another 6.5 weeks with them, was awesome.
So how did that work when COVID was happening and you guys weren't able to tour? I mean, I would imagine, a lot of bands make the bulk of their living by touring. So, I mean, that's kind of rough when touring shuts down. I mean, what did you guys do?
I don't live a lavish lifestyle. I'm not house broke. So, I'm very smart with my money. And so I tuck a lot of it away. And I was able to weather the storm for a year and a half. And
not many guys in your position are like you.
I didn't miss a beat. I live in a small house. I don't have car payments. Everything is paid for. And I could go years and never have to work because I save well. But a lot of people were looking for other work and were doing jobs outside of the entertainment world.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed and heard is a lot of bands that used to tour, or artists, for example, they got that stability with a regular job and benefits and everything else, which you don't have in the music industry. And so a lot of them are just doing what they did during COVID. They're not going back out on the road. And everything's more, tour buses are way more expensive. Fuel,
diesel,
everything's more expensive. So if you want to tour comfortably with a tour bus, you have to be able to bring in a certain amount of money to cover all the expenses and get paid and that sort of thing. So a lot of bands that, were riding in like the bandwagon, which is like a glorified
Maybe
RV.
Not a real established band.
Yeah, if you're a band grinding it out on the road doing van tours and a trail, I feel really bad for bands that are trying to do that, and I understand it, but it's we were able to weather through that hard period, and we capitalized on it and wrote a new record. And then when everything started to open back up, when we did the first tour with Priest, we had to COVID test. Like if we had 2 days off.
It was crazy.
If we had 2 days off and the next day we were going to play, everybody had to test negative before they could enter the venue. Everybody had to wear masks. Nobody was allowed backstage. Very stringent protocols.
And that kind of stuff it's
fallen by the wayside now.
But how about in other countries? Because you tour all over the world.
Well, since that happened in the beginning of 2020,
right?
We haven't gone to. Well, we did go to Canada, But other than that, we haven't toured Europe. We didn't do South America.
Okay.
So it's only been the U.S. primarily. So I really can't speak to what it's like abroad right now.
Well, tell me a little bit about before Queensryche. I mean, you got a really interesting story. And, I've talked to guys like Shannon Larkin from Godsmack and Brian Johnson from AC/DC, who were guys that were joining an existing band that had some success already, just kind of like yourself. But take me back. Where are you from originally? Are you from?
I'm from St. Petersburg, where we're sitting. Yeah.
Wow, you were a true,
I'm a true
Floridian.
Native. Yeah.
That's very rare. Do you know that?
I was born at St. Anthony's Hospital. And yeah, I'm born here.
So your family and you grew up here in St. Pete?
Grew up here. I went to Tyrone Elementary. I went to Seminole High School, graduated in 92, and have lived here, my whole life.
Really? So what about growing up? Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Sure.
And growing up.
So my parents were divorced since I was like 1, since I was just a baby.
Right.
And my dad remarried, and my mom remarried, actually, to who was in professional baseball.
Who is this?
His name is Hal Lanier.
Okay.
They divorced when I was going into middle school. They were married for 7 or 8 years or something.
So your mom married a professional baseball player?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool when you were in elementary school, I bet, right?
Yeah, so actually, early in his career, he had played for, I believe, the Giants. He played for... Oh, my mom will kill me if I get it wrong. I think he may have played for the Phillies. I don't know. He played for big Major League Baseball teams.
He was in the bigs.
But when they married, he was the first and third base coach for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay.
And I was the bat boy for the Cardinals.
Wow, what a memory.
So my mom has just amazing stories of knowing Mickey Mantle. Like I have a to Todd Best Wishes Mickey Mantle baseball. She had a Satchel Paige. Ozzie Smith used to were really good friends with our family and would come over to the house, and Tommy Herr. I used to go, Whitey Herzog, who was the manager
the
back
Cardinals,
then.
Yeah.
So he took me fishing on his little bass boat, and we'd go in the lake and go fishing. And
Todd, your friends growing up, you had to be
cool.
the envy of everyone. Because I have a similar story. My sister married a professional baseball player, but she dated him in college, and he went on to play in the Olympics, and then he got drafted by the Cincinnati Reds.
Wow.
I would go to spring training.
Yeah.
I would meet everybody. Pete Rose made me cry. He took me into the locker room to personally meet him. So I was probably 10, 12 years old, something like that. But me and you have a lot in common. And growing up, being 12, years old and being exposed to, because I don't know about you, because you're in the rock and roll business as, somewhat I am, not a musician, but I'm a broadcaster, and I on the radio, on a rock station, and I talk to you guys a lot, and I love talking to guys in bands, especially bands that I really love, but still to this day, and I don't know if it's the same for you, I'm not jaded, but since it's become a part of my life, maybe I take it for granted a little bit. But whenever I get a chance to meet like Reggie Jackson at spring training, that's when I become a child again,
Totally. I mean, my mom had, like for Halloween, she would have this like mannequin figure out on the front porch, and it had Hal's baseball uniform, like the real one from when he would coach. And like we had a pair of Lou Brock's shoes. She donated a lot of things to the Children's Dream Fund, and was able to help raise money for these kids that are terminal and kind of their last wish things.
Right.
And but yeah, growing up around baseball was really cool. He would come home with tons of all this merchandise. Nike, we'd get tons of free Nike shoes as a kid. And but yeah, I was a bat boy for the Cardinals, and I would be on the field playing catch with, back then the team was, Andy Van Slyke and Keith Hernandez and all these guys, and we would just, Darryl Porter, who was the catcher. Willie McGee. I knew Willie McGee, Joaquin Andujar, Bruce Sutter, Bob Forsch, like that World Series team,
That's fantastic.
And the first glove I ever got, Hal brought home for me, because he taught me how to play baseball.
That was gonna be the next
and I was in
question.
Little League, and he gave me this glove. And I looked at this glove, and he said, "Oh, I got this for you." And it looked kind of used. And I was like, "Well, what is this?" You know?
What is this?
And,
Yeah, how about a new glove,
And
Hal?
so there's an embroidered name on the glove. Well, I take a ballpoint pen and I put this X across this name, and I write Todd LaTorre. This is my glove. And I said to my mom, I go, "Who's Phil Garner, Mom?"
Oh, Mom.
She goes, "He's a Hall of Fame shortstop." And I was like, I think he played for the Pirates. I don't know. It's been so many years. But anyway, you know, you said Pete Rose. I have a Pete Rose baseball. So lots of really cool memorabilia from that time. And of course, they divorced. And I only spoke to him one time when I was 18 years old. And it was very short. It was, you know, he walked out on my mom on the marriage, and it was a sour thing.
Yeah.
But you know, there are some very memorable times. My mom has a World Series ring from when they played in, I think it was 82. So yeah, sports I played soccer as a kid, and then when I got into high school, when I was 13. I started playing guitar when I was 10, but at 13, I really took a liking to the drums, and I kind of started growing my hair out. But I wanted to wrestle, and I was always really small but fast.
Good for us too. When you're smaller and you got a little bit of strength, you could always use a 102-pounder in high school wrestling.
I was 115 pounds all through high school. You know, I was one of the smaller guys in the school, but they wanted me to cut my hair.
Oh no!
And I was like, you know, I'm really into music. At 13, I'm kind of exploring new things, and I was like, I'm not cutting my hair for the wrestling team. And it literally, from 13 on, was full bore music. I was a drummer. That's what I wanted to be. Was a drummer in a band. What
was it that got you into music? Like, who was it? What band? Where did you?
You know, as a kid, I always loved Billy Joel.
Really?
Always.
You know what?
It's one of my favorites.
I'm blown away.
Yeah, one of my favorite artists of all time is Billy Joel. And I remember riding in the back of a car and hearing this drum fill. You know, ooh, what's the matter with the goes?
Isn't that Liberty? What was that drummer's
Liberty DeVito. Yeah,
Liberty DeVito.
And that drum roll just captivated me, and I always found myself being very in tune with the rhythm, the percussive and the rhythmic elements of music. And it came very natural to me. And so I pursued drumming forever, and then joined bands my first band when I was 15, started playing in clubs. And, you know, I always liked to sing, but I was really a drummer at heart. And that's kind of, you know, working awful jobs. I was a roofer for a while, and actually not too far down from here at these big apartment complexes.
How old were you when you were a roofer?
19,
okay.
20.
What was that your first job?
No, man.
What was your first job?
My first job was valet parking.
Okay.
And I loved it.
Yeah, because you're parking Cadillacs for big cash.
I was getting cash.
Yeah.
And I was good at it.
And you were getting a check, right? At the end, you know, you were getting an hourly check plus some tips.
Dude,
you always had cash on
I loved
you.
it. And I mean, I was driving. You know, I had go-karts as a kid, and I would drive my dad's car, you know, in between his lap at 6 years old, and using the Cadillac emblem as the centerpiece and line that up with the right line. Then, you know, you're in the center of the lane, and I would work the steering wheel. He'd do the pedals, and then later we'd go in a big parking lot, and as I'm older, he would let me drive. So I was able to drive and park, and I was always really good at driving.
Right.
And valet parking was like my first job, but I did every kind of crappy job. I mean, I worked at Pizza Hut. I worked doing a lot of car detailing. Then I worked for Thunder Marine detailing boats, and then I did but nothing like solid. I went to St. Pete JC for a year, dropped out. A year or two later, I went back. I thought, boy, I'm going nowhere fast.
What were you trying to be? What were you studying in junior college?
I was doing just the basic prerequisite stuff, but I wanted to go into more criminal law.
Oh, wow.
Or something in medicine, but I don't want to deal with sick people. And
it's a drag.
But, you know, I really was into kind of the criminal mind and the elements of that. And so I always, a big part of me wanted to go into criminal law. In fact, one of my good friends who became a lawyer, we used to always say, Costas and LaTorre. And he's a lawyer in town. Sean Costas is his name. And we still meet for lunch once in a while. And I always say, man, I'm so proud of you. We used to talk in high school about being lawyers.
Yeah.
And you did. He goes, yeah, but look at what you do, man. He's like, you know, I'm dealing with people's problems all day and litigation. And, you know, you think the grass is always greener. But I worked a ton of crappy jobs in the pursuit of making it in music. And then in my it wasn't happening into my 20s, and I actually went to P-Tech and took an automotive upholstery course that was 2 years full time. And I loved working with my hands. Right. I was always into cars, lowriders, hot rods, street rods, and that was what I did until I joined Queensryche from '95 until I joined them in 2012, and I had to phase the business out because this band tours full time. So
you were a full-time car upholstery guy.
I started out in automotive and doing a lot of custom work. I wasn't doing like dealer work. I was doing a lot of custom cars, and then I ended up getting into furniture. I was doing work for Robin Stuckey. I was doing work for Michelle Miller Design, who's a very reputable designer here, and then I did everything. I said, okay, if I, this doctor has a custom car and I'm doing that, but then he has an office and he's got a bunch of waiting room chairs and then he's got a boat. So I ended up doing all kinds of upholstery, and I loved it. It kept it diverse. I built up a great reputation locally as this artisan. It allowed me to have long hair and look how I look.
Your company, right?
But, also be very artistic and be my own boss.
That's amazing. I bet you 95% of Queensryche fans do not know that.
A lot of them don't, and so I'm always like, when I sit somewhere, I'm always looking at the booths and
look at that chair.
The upholstery. But I've been able to utilize those skills to modify a lot of my clothes, because I still have all my industrial sewing machines. I can sew for hours, dude. I love it. And it's a dying trade where, how do you learn to do that? And everyone's got to sit their ass on something.
Right.
My grandfather was an upholsterer. My cousin was an upholsterer. I never thought I would ever want to do that. It didn't really look interesting to me as a kid.
Somewhat of a family business, huh?
It was kind of a family thing. My dad was a chiropractor here in town for 40 years. He passed away in 2014. But I've always just wanted to do my own thing and not work in the corporate world.
Wow.
So that's what I did until I joined Queensryche. And people still hit me up like, hey, man, you still do upholstery? I've got this, blah, blah, blah. And because I don't have to do it for a living now, it's kind of like, that might be fun to take on.
Might be a good little project.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Like, I'm doing my friend I grew up with in high school, his dad he's the original owner of a 1970 Monte Carlo. And over the course of quite a while now, I redid all the seats. I did the hanging headliner in it. I redid some door panels, and I've just got a couple little things left to finish, and then that's done. But I'm kind of doing it because they're like family to me.
Gotcha.
But that was something I really, really loved. I still enjoy it. And I thought, I can always fall back on this trade, and I could do this anywhere in the world. Give me a sewing machine, a pair of scissors, and a staple gun, and I can make a living.
Wow. I had no idea. We've known each other for a few years now, and we haven't gotten into any type of in-depth conversation like that before. So that, for me, is really, really cool to find out about you. Now, let's back up to music a little bit. Now, you said you didn't want to pursue sports in high school. They're going to make you cut your hair to join the wrestling teams. You said, screw that. So you go into music. Tell me about your first band. Was that during high school?
Yep.
Because I do know, and I want to talk a lot about Crimson Glory, which was, you were the drummer of that band, and that was
singer.
You were the singer of Crimson Glory?
Yeah, I sang for them.
So was that after midnight?
He passed away, And then they did a memorial tribute concert in Atlanta called Prog Power. And a really long story short, a friend of mine, rest his soul, his name is Matt LaTorre. He played with John Oliva. Everybody knows him from the band Savatage.
And wasn't he also in Trans-Siberian
He's part
Orchestra?
of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But so Matt knew the Crimson Glory guys. I didn't know them. And I had written a little demo with Matt. Hey, I think I'm going to give this singing thing a try. And he loved what he heard. He was very impressed. And he thought, wow, this guy could be the next singer for Crimson Glory, because they were on hiatus all the time. And so, long story short, I was asked to go meet them. They were having 17 guest singers do this concert that Crimson Glory was headlining at this Prog Power show. And all of these other known singers were going to participate in doing this Crimson Glory concert because Midnight had passed away. Well, I was able to capture the essence of what that vocal was, and I ended up joining the band. And I was in that band for 3 years. We did a couple tours in Europe. That got me some notoriety throughout Europe, a little bit in the U.S. But
what's the time frame on this?
This was
Probably
2010-ish.
Okay. Midnight passed away in 2008 or 9.
I think he passed in 2009, if memory serves me correctly.
I think you're right.
And so I think this thing was in 2010, and then So I was only with them. I never did a record with them.
Okay.
It was only live stuff, and we were writing a new record, a concept record, but it was just a lot of stagnant things going on. And at that point, I was in Queensryche also, so I was kind of in both bands at the same time. And I just decided to cut the cord and, go where the action was.
So I knew John Drenning was one of the first guys I ever met in this
Right.
business when I was in Sarasota
Yeah.
working at a radio station. And it was the album that Crimson Glory had when you opened it up. There was the naked girls and the daisy
Transcendence.
chain. Yeah,
It's a phenomenal record.
Phenomenal
It's a
band.
the phenomenal band. I mean, in my opinion,
you have a lot of similarities with Midnight, as do you with former lead singer of Queensryche, Jeff Tate, as well. You really do have, and they used to draw comparisons to both Midnight and Jeff Tate as well.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, if you listen to when I first joined Crimson Glory, we did. I did a few of their songs with my vocal kind of on top of the original, and it's very similar, like extremely similar. And I think that really resonated with their audience.
Were you a fan of Crimson
I didn't even
Glory?
know their music,
Really?
which is crazy because it's perfect for what I like.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. And Matt LaTorre was like, I can't believe you've never heard of them, blah, blah, blah. That's how I got into that band. But prior to that, when I was 15, my buddy Russell Martin was playing bass with a local band in high school, and they were called Blackwell. And so the guy, Craig Blackwell, was the guy who I did my solo record with that came out 2 years ago.
Right.
And so he and I are like brothers. We've maintained a friendship since we were kids. And that was the first band I joined. We were playing down in Gulfport at this place called the Swamp Club back then. And then we played the Volley Club. And then the band kind of reformed, and it was called Infrared. So we used to play ML Chasers all the time, and, the Loading Zone, and just all the local Tampa scene. And I was a drummer. We recorded one professional demo on cassette. This was, I don't think bands were even really making, you were shopping stuff on cassettes.
Yeah, 4 tracks, man, yeah.
And so we went into a professional studio and did it. I have one tape of that. But
you ever listen to it these days and go, oh?
I haven't listened to it a long time, but it's in my tape deck in my studio.
I just found one of mine and I was like, oh, cringe. Oh, those.
But you know what? I mean, I love those. That's, we all had dreams of, we were watching MTV and Headbangers Ball, and it was like, that's where I should be doing that. And so I played drums for many, 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 many years in bands. And then at some point I hung it up. I put my drums away. Nothing was inspiring me. I was bored. And then I ended up playing with some local guys here doing beach bar gigs. playing Matchbox 20 and Natalie Imbruglia and Seal and whatever, just to keep my drums, just to play.
Right.
And so I did that, on the side of my upholstery business. And then, of course, I got into Crimson Glory. It was never a full-time touring thing. And then that opened the doors to have footage on YouTube when I met Michael Wilton of Queensryche at the NAMM convention in California. He happened to go online and do some digging, and he was impressed. And long story short, I got in the band.
Yeah, let's get into that. Your big break. Would you consider, obviously, I think your big break would be joining Queensryche.
That was huge. I mean,
that's a huge thing, but there's probably a certain series of events that led you to that. And if you could take me through maybe what those events were that ultimately became your big break.
So my friend Tom McDine, who was the other guitar player in the band John Oliva's Pain, that's who Matt LaTorre played with. There was a band called Circle to Circle also that John Oliva was a songwriter in, and I think he had produced that first record and whatnot. Zach Stevens, who ended up singing for Savatage, was the singer of this band. So my buddy Tom McDine was an endorsed artist through, he was endorsed with Seymour Duncan guitar pickups. And they had a private artist dinner party. And he's like, hey, I have this Seymour Duncan thing I have to go to tonight. This was at NAMM. And
what is NAMM for people that...
I think it stands for North American Music Merchandisers, NAMM. And so...
So it's just like a big show.
It's a huge convention for people in the business, whether you have DJ equipment, PA stuff,
drumsticks,
every music maker from DAWs, Pro Tools to Presonus to microphone companies, every guitar company you can think of, drum company, keyboards, it's all there, and it's just a huge show.
Trade show for musical equipment.
And so he had a +1 for this dinner thing. Do you want to go with me? I said, yeah, sure. So I walk in, and there's Yngwie Malmsteen eating dinner. There's Warren DeMartini from Rat. It was very small, though. There was not a lot of people there, like 30 people, 40 maybe. And I was this +1. So I went up to the buffet. I saw Michael Wilton there. And I actually, it's a well-known story that I mistook him as Eric Peterson from Testament, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. Short guy. And I just saw Testament the night before. They really don't look alike. But at that moment, I had said to him, hey, great show last night. And he looked a little perplexed and looked at me, and I said, oh, God, brain fart. Sorry, dude, I totally know who you are. You're with Queensryche. And we just struck up a conversation, and I'm standing there with a plate full of food. I want to sit down and eat. And I said, I want to eat. Do you want to sit at the table and join me and my friend? Nobody's going to bother you or anything. We're not going to hound you.
Right.
And he sat for a minute, and he said, okay. So we sat down. And we talked shop, and I introduced myself. I sing in a band called Crimson Glory. Actually, Crimson Glory had opened for you before, I think, on the Mindcrime tour. Very Queensryche-ish.
Prog metal, very similar.
Yeah, another pioneering band that should have gone way bigger than they did. But nevertheless, we talked about doing some side music for he would write stuff when you see ESPN, the sports reel, and the guy's going for the touchdown, and you hear the rock music in the background and stuff like that. So he was doing music for television, side stuff. And I said, I'm a drummer, I sing, but, and he was like, yeah, maybe we could do some of this side stuff together. Okay. And then 2 days later, I got home, and he sent me four new songs, but I said, well, this sounds like Queensryche music. This doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound like this kind
ESPN,
kind of stuff. So I just said, dude, wow, this just screams Queensryche, because he said, can you sing like Chris Cornell? I love his voice. And I was like, actually, I kind of can in a little bit, but man, I just go to Queensryche when I hear this. The music sounds like Queensryche. So I just said, I don't know if you're giving me creative liberty or whatever to do what I want, but I'm just going to go ahead and write what I want on one of these. Out of the 4, one of them really kind of inspired me. The other 3 I wasn't crazy about, but I really liked one. And it ended up being the first song we wrote together, called "Don't Look Back," on the first Queensryche album I did with them in 2013. So I sent it to him, and he's like, "Wow, this is great. Any chance you could sing some cover our stuff, like Queen of the Reich, Eyes of a Stranger, blah blah blah." I said sure. So I just used this real shitty karaoke filter.
Right.
Before now, you can completely strip the vocals out of a track. But I tried to it kind of tucks the vocal. It makes it a little flangey sounding, but I did that and recorded some of the classics, and I sent it to him, and he was blown away. And
had to be blown away.
He was blown away, and he showed.
I'm going to tell you, when I first saw you guys, and I, again, have been around this for a minute, so I do know that when a singer joins a band, it's going to be a little bit different. They're going to put their spin on a little bit different.
Yeah.
And on the new Queensryche stuff, I definitely think of Todd LaTorre. This is
right.
you. This is your spin. But when it's time to do a Silent Lucidity or Jet City Woman,
yeah.
you not only pull it off, you pull it off better than the original. And I'm not just saying that. You are. I mean, the similarity. It's just so unbelievable. How you were able to channel to sound exactly the way that the album was recorded.
I'm a bit of a vocal chameleon. I can do a ridiculous Neil Diamond.
Really?
Yeah.
Give me a little bit right
Not
now.
right yet.
Come on.
Not yet. But I
Sweet Caroline.
He's got this nasal, hello again, hello.
There it is.
But there's that rasp, but it's there's these nuances that I've always paid attention to. I've always loved comedians and stand-up comics,
too.
and
Big
I've
fan.
loved people that do impressions and voice things. So I always say, well, what makes a singer sound this way? Are they nasally? Where in their face is that sound resonating? How do they do that? So as a kid, I always loved trying to copy voices, right? And so I've always had a good ear for what makes Bruce Dickinson sound the way that he sounds. What makes CJ Snare from Firehouse, who I'm friends with. One time I left him a voice message, and I sang one of his songs on his voicemail. And his mom
I'm friends
happened.
with Bill Leverty.
Okay,
Funny.
great guys. And
Great.
he happened to play it, and his mom heard it, and she goes, "Why are you singing on your voicemail?" And he goes, "Well, that's actually my friend Todd, because it sounded so much like him." So when it came to the Queensryche thing, I grew up loving the band, and there is an anatomical advantage. No matter how much I try to sound like Steve Perry, I'm not going to, right? There are certain benefits that the bone structures in your face, and if you're a baritone, if you're a tenor, what does your voice sound like? Thankfully, I'm able to sound very similar to the way that Jeff Tate sang those songs, and the nuances that are very characteristic, and what goes into how those songs are sung, and what the listener expects to hear. So if I deviated too far, it would say, well, that sounds nothing like it. So I get crucified either way. Oh God, he's just a copycat, or it wouldn't sound anything like it. So I say, well, I do sing similar to that, and I really want to sound how they go. I'm not trying to copy him to the T, but I'm just very mindful of how those songs need to be done. And
that's what people want to hear.
It's what they want to hear, and it comes very naturally to me. So I guess I got lucky that the band that took interest in me was Queensryche, and not say Green Day, for example.
Right.
Where I can actually do a pretty ridiculous impression of that guy. He always sounds like he has a cold,
Right.
I'm having trouble trying to sleep. It's this kind of, I'm getting chills that running out. It's that.
We can make a lot of money together, man.
Yeah, but it's that kind of almost like a heady cold sound, right? And so it was a life-changing experience to join the band. He liked what he heard. He pitched it to the other guys and said, hey, Jeff is promoting his solo thing. Queensryche doesn't really have any more dates on the books except for 2 or 3. why don't we do a side project and we'll call it something else, and we'll do a lot of deep cuts from Queensryche that we don't really play anymore. And then, when Queensryche has to resume, Queensryche would go out and resume, and that would be my 2 minutes of holy shit with these guys from Queensryche. Well, I didn't know that there were problems happening within the band. He happened to be fired. There was a huge altercation that took place in Brazil, but nevertheless, they had a parting of the ways. He was fired. I had already done 2 shows under this name, Rising West, with those guys, and we sold 2 nights out at the Hard Rock in Seattle. It was it went over like amazingly well, and next thing I know, I'm on Billboard.com, and I'm the new singer of Queensryche, and I just never would have imagined.
What was your feeling? Like, what did it hit you when you first went to Billboard.com, or like when did it hit you that I'm the
when it was on Billboard?
Yeah.
And then I had seen. I remember going to Wikipedia.
Okay, you see, I
remember going to
goosebumps.
Wikipedia, and it said members. And there was my name, and somebody had created a Wikipedia for me. I don't know who. And I had a Wikipedia page, and there was my name, and it said past members. And then there were the past members and the former singer.
Members.
And current members, and I was right there. And I went, holy shit.
I'm somebody.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
This is real. This is getting real.
And this is 11 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah, in July, it'll be 11 years.
Awesome.
And so I was like, and that's when the doors really opened. When we would tour Europe, Crimson Glory really gave me a name. And I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity that I got with Crimson Glory. But now I had to really deliver. And I had to deliver a lot because Crimson Glory only toured once in a blue moon. This band actively tours 100 shows a year.
Wow.
So, I know I can do it, but there's also a part going, I hope I can do this, right? I knew that I had the ability. I just didn't know about the sustainability and is my voice going to hold up for night after night after, like I didn't know.
And beyond that, and I was reading some of your tweets last night. There was one that was around the holidays that you were basically saying, like, if you're not a touring musician, then you can't relate to this. But this shit is hard, and it basically was talking about flying to gigs and and the touring, what a bitch touring can be, and how when you want to be home, you want to decompress, have some downtime with your family. Did you ever think about that before you got into Queensryche, a big band? Like, hey, I'm going to be traveling. We're going to be doing this. I got to interview with this asshole for a podcast. I got to do this. I
knew that those were things that would take place. I didn't know how much I would be gone and traveling. And I knew that I had the ability, but I didn't realize, because I hadn't experienced all of every variable all at once, so much happening with the demand, You were talking about your voice holding up. I knew that I was going to get, I knew that there were people that were going to totally be supportive, and I knew that there was going to be people that would just condemn me and criticize me. And I thought, I kind of been through this because Midnight passed away. I wasn't the original singer of Crimson Glory. I'm not the original singer of Queensryche. I'm never going to be. That's fine. But I believe I can vocally do what this band deserves, what the audience expects to hear. We don't have to downtune. The band had been downtuning for the vocals for years. We can play it in the standard tunings now. I can hit these high notes.
Yes, you can.
Yada yada. But I really didn't know. It was that point where it was like I wasn't even asked, "Do you want the gig?" It was like when I did the Rising West thing, I thought, "Wow, this is amazing." I'm in a band with these guys that mind you, 6 months prior, I had seen them perform at the Ruth Eckerd Hall for their 30th anniversary tour, and the director of that place was a Crimson Glory fan and asked if I wanted to meet Queensryche. And I was like, I mean, okay, I don't have to, but I could be at the back of the line, and when everybody's done doing their paid meet, whatever they're doing,
right,
I can go through and say hi. And I did, and I met everybody, and I actually got blown off by the singer. I was very praising of, wow, you know, you and Bruce Dickinson, and you know, you're largely responsible for the reason why I sing the way that I do. And I basically got a thank you, and then that was it. And then kind of a look around, like, who else is there to talk to?
Yeah.
And I remember leaving, having this like angel and devil on my shoulder. One side was going, hey, you know, that's okay. The guy's probably been praised for so many years. It's just, he's numb to it. And then the other part thought, no, man, like,
what a dick.
You know, there was a part of me that was like, you know, not digging that interaction.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, no kidding, I said, one day he's going to know who I am.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't even know in what capacity, but there was kind of this part of me that felt a little miffed that I was shrugged off.
Yeah.
like blatantly shrugged off.
Wow.
And so I said, one day he's going to know who I am. 6 months later, I'm in the band.
Taking his place. Yeah.
And I never, and I kind of didn't like, part of me was like, man, this guy that I've always looked up to, maybe he's not going to like me just because by default, because of the, like, who's this guy? You know, you don't want that. Somebody you look up to in your teens, and then you're in a position where, you know, are we not cool with each other? Are we rivals? I mean, personally, we weren't, but the way that the media puts it out there is like, well, here's the new guy and here's the original guy, and then everybody starts to pin you against each other, which I had nothing personally against. I didn't know him. I just remember that interaction.
That one interaction.
And I remember saying, you know, I used to watch that metal show.
Yeah.
And I looked at the screen, I would say, talk about this band, talk about that band. It's only the big bands you're talking about. And I looked at the TV and I said, one day I'm going to be on that show.
Wow.
And I was in Queensryche, and that year I was on that metal show.
Eddie Trunk and Jim Florentine, and Don James.
Yeah, I was on the show with me and Scott and Dave Mustaine from Megadeth.
Wow.
And so I was like, man, all these things I'm saying, like, they're happening.
You're putting them out into the universe, and they're becoming realistic.
But you know, when I joined Queensryche, that's when, like, real doors started opening.
I bet.
And I'm meeting like next tier, not I don't mean to say talent wise, but from a popular standpoint.
Sure.
Now I'm meeting
Metallica.
I'm meeting Jason Newsted, who was in Metallica. I'm doing, you know, on TV with Dave Mustaine. I'm meeting Zakk Wylde and all these other people that, with Crimson Glory, I don't think I would have been able to have that kind of access. I think when it was like, oh, this is Todd, he sings for Queensryche, it was almost like, you know, that said enough. Like, we don't know this guy, but wow, okay, if he's singing for Queensryche, he must be good. That's kind of the implication anyway. Or there was credibility there and a known name of a band that, had I said Crimson Glory, which was more of a cult followed band, they might have said, oh, I've never heard of them, but I'll check them out.
Right.
You know, so
Queensryche, everybody knows.
Queensryche is a, you know,
you like rock music, you know Queensryche,
especially from our era. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, it was a big deal.
And you were talking about, like, getting snubbed backstage, and you know what? That's still a tough thing for me. I try not to get too personal or take things too personal when I do meet a band that I really, really admire.
You don't want to be let down.
I don't want to be let down, because then it'll cause me to, like, not want to
hear their music. Yeah,
and I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm not gonna ask you about that. Who's let you down? I want to know who has turned you around. Maybe somebody that you weren't really a big fan of their music, but you got to know them on a personal level, and now you're friends, and now you're a fan of the band? Because that's happened to me on a few occasions. And Godsmack's definitely one of them. I became good friends with their drummer.
Yeah.
And now I just love the guys.
I'm trying to think of who maybe I wasn't into their music, but I got to meet them and I became more of a fan of the band because I had a great interaction. I got to know them as a person.
Right.
Off the top of my head, Saliva. I wasn't a big fan of Saliva, but I got to become friends with Bobby, the singer. And he wasn't the original singer, but nevertheless,
original
he's the
singer's
singer.
Back, isn't he? Josie is back with the band.
I don't know. I think he's come back and done something, and then he went away again, and I don't really know. But when I would hear them, it was a better. I got more into their music because
you had this relationship.
I had this relationship, but I would say, Jeff, most of the people that I've met have been really cool.
That's awesome.
Mark Slaughter is such an awesome, nice guy. Dana Strum, that camp. All the guys in Stryper who I'm friends with, I'm a huge fan of that band, and they were, Sammy Hagar. I got to meet Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony, and those guys were so cool. And most everyone has been really cool. There's a couple people that I'm not going to name that kind of try to big league you, or they don't big league you, but you see how they behave, and they're still this very kind of diva demanding, treating people like shit, and just very belittling, and the temper flares, and this kind of
that sucks.
This kind of attitude, hey, you're not selling arenas anymore. You're playing clubs. You're screaming at this guy, or you're just very demanding, and it's very off-putting to me. And I think some of these people that became famous at such an early age and maintained that career through their whole life, I almost think that there's a maturity level that they never got to, because everyone was always saying yes, and kissing their ass and whatever you want. And when they're told no or something isn't to their liking, they throw a fit like a baby. And you're like, oh man, that sucks, because I really love this person's music or whatever.
Yeah.
But those are few and far between in my experience. Most everyone I've met has been really down to earth and super cool and has treated me with respect. Judas Priest people, so cool. All the guys in the Scorpions treated us so well, and just very, very kind people. And it's kind of like when you're in the club. It's a small circle, right? This guy, I'm friends with that. Everybody kind of knows everybody in that world.
It is small circle.
And it's, I think also, going back to your point, when did it hit you? When we started playing with bands and they would go out of their way to say, man, you're doing a hell of a job.
Yes.
Or they're viewing me as one of their peers now.
Just like a band that you would admire, that knew who you were and was familiar with your music, that has to make you go whoa, that's pretty cool. When we're playing shows together, or I get to meet them and they're aware of what I've done in my work, and to be seen as an equal. I think to me that was important, that I'm not just a one album guy. I wasn't a guy that came in and did a tour. You're not the new guy.
I mean, people still say, the new singer, but I don't think that's probably ever going to go away. But I think what really was important to me was to be seen as an equal or a peer among those other musicians that I grew up watching.
Any tour that you can remember that you were just kind of maybe a little starstruck, whoa, I can't believe we're playing with these guys right now.
I mean,
whether it was at a festival or maybe earlier in your career with Queensryche,
when we toured with the Scorpions, and
good one.
There's Klaus walking right, wow, or hey Todd, come up and give me a hug, and I'm just like, dude, I saw you in 1988 at the Tampa the stadium,
the old sombrero,
for the Monsters of Rock concert, and like now I'm starting to know these people, and or the first time I met Rob Halford,
the metal god.
Yeah, we were leaving our dressing room, and we're walking through the bowels of this arena, and it's all concrete hallways, as you know, and there's Rob standing in a robe and a pair of, I think he had slippers on and a coffee mug, and he's at his doorway, and we're all walking by, and he's like, hey guys, or whatever he said. And I'm just like, holy shit, that's Rob Halford. Like,
he looks like Hugh Hefner. He's not wearing his leather chaps.
I said, well, I'm sure we're going to get a chance to meet and talk and get to know each other a little bit, and that did happen.
You did, yeah.
And it was phenomenal. So yeah, dude,
Wild ride,
it's been an amazing experience. That I don't take for granted. As you know, when you get to meet so many people and you're in that surrounding, it becomes your normal, right?
You're a little bit more comfortable. You're not as awkward. Yeah.
You get desensitized, like, and so you're not like, quote, starstruck like you would be before. But then you have friends on the outside that are like, dude, I can't believe you know that person. And
then it hits you.
And then you're like, yeah, actually, I do know that. I do know them. And you think like, I remember being on that other side where you'd be like, God, could you imagine knowing this person and this person? And then you end up knowing them, but you end up becoming, if you become friends with them, you know them as the person now, and you guys talk about other stuff outside of what do you do in music?
Right.
You're talking about
being
your
upholstery.
Your podcast, or this guy just went on vacation with his wife and his kids, and you talk about real life shit. Not the band.
Right.
What
a wild ride. So many different things that I found out about you. And it was just a few short years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that our mutual friend Jason Beeler hooked us up, because I was new in St. Pete. And he goes, hey, I got to hook you up with my friend Todd, who's the singer of Queensryche. I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And one thing led to another, and we did a couple of shows together, partnerships with the radio station and the band. And we've had a great relationship. And I called you the other night, and I was like, hey, man, I got to have you on my podcast, because I don't know anything about what you would have become if you were not the lead singer of Queensryche.
There's something I didn't mention. So in 2008, I became a licensed independent insurance adjuster, and a buddy of mine was doing it for many years and making a shit ton of money. And I was like, well, what is that? I don't even know. Like, what is this? What do you do? And he took me under his wing, taught me the software. It's called Xactimate. It's kind of like the Pro Tools of the adjusting world.
So you get into a car accident?
No. I was doing cat work, catastrophes.
Oh, okay.
So the first storm I worked was Hurricane Ike. And so I would go out, I would get deployed through the firm that I worked for. And I'm the guy that's assessing all the damage to your home and writing an estimate to try to get you paid. Now, the more the estimate was, the more money I make. A lot of people, but I would have to prove it through all of the photographs. But I mean, I would get on roofs and do overviews and measure that out, scope all the rooms of the house, do all the outside elevations. And then I was creating an estimate, doing 3D renderings of the roof and doing room by room, like everything from the door stopper on the bottom of a door to, concrete monolithic slabs, tying in steel, everything that's involved with construction. And I did that for many years, and I loved that. That was like, you could go out and make 35, 40K in a month. And so I loved it. And then I worked a storm here and there. Then I got in the band, right? Well, when Irma hit, we were down for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And my license was expired, but I knew that if there was damage in Florida, they could issue an emergency temp license. And they did. I went to Okeechobee for a week and scoped 48 claims, came back, wrote my ass off on the computer, and did very, very well.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I don't have an active license anymore. I do want to get it, because I love doing it. I would go out to Georgia and do hail claims on roofs. And I worked up in New England for snowstorms, and it was awesome. I loved it because, you're making killer money.
And you're helping people too.
Dude, I worked in Houston for 2 months, and these people's lives are devastated. And you're the first person to try to get them money and paid and get their life back together. And it allowed me to create my own schedule, and so I would route the claims I was going to see based on a zip code, and I would group them, and I would start making phone calls that I was their adjuster. Could we make an appointment for this time? And I would just go scope all the houses that day. That night, I would upload hundreds of photos, start doing my photo reports, start doing my general loss statement, start building the estimates. And, that first time I ever did it, that first 2-week paycheck was like 16 grand and change. And I went, holy shit, this is like, I'm not a college graduate.
Right.
I'm not,
This is real money.
This is what this is like. But I enjoyed the work. And
that's the key.
I really loved doing it. And my friend ended up going on to start his own public adjusting firm. But I worked for a couple different independent adjusting firms. So that's another thing. You say, well, what would you do if the band called it quits or whatever? I would still write and record, and I would love to perform. But I probably would get back into the adjusting world and do that because it was lucrative, and I like working on the computer. Upholstery is tough on your body. It's tough on that's more of like a slower paced artistry.
Right.
The adjusting was more hustle. But the money was exponentially better than what I did as an upholsterer. I could have grown my business. In hindsight, I kind of wish that I would have grown my upholstery business bigger into doing like hotels and casinos, and it could have been a easily $1 million+ business. But I was too proud back then that I said, well, I sign my name to everything that leaves the shop. And if I don't know that there's people that are going to do better than me. And I was afraid to give someone that kind of authority to do the work and me not be around and know that it was to the quality that I wanted under my name. And so I always kept it as like a mom and pop shop, but it was me, and I had one of my best friends that did it too, that would help me part-time. And I loved that. I'd turn the tunes on, open the doors, and do my craft. But, doing insurance adjusting was a lot of fun.
It's like Todd LaTorre, if you weren't the lead singer of Queensryche, what would you be doing? A lot of people would be like, well, you probably maybe write songs for other bands, maybe produce, maybe do this. Nope.
Possibly, yeah. But
maybe.
But I have options,
You have a lot of options, from the upholstery business, the insurance claims. I had no idea. This guy, you're a Renaissance man, if I can say. Great talking to you. So learned so much about you.
Thank you, man.
Just think, if Todd didn't get his big break, maybe he'd be reupholstering your kitchen
couch.
chairs.
Yeah.
Or he'd come after, a hurricane has flooded your first floor of your house, and you got to come over and make an insurance.
I could be the guy that knocks on your door.
You could have been that guy.
But, I think having been in just the regular domain of the workforce, and then not getting into Queensryche until my late 30s, that's, I don't have this mindset of this is all that I know. This is all I've ever done.
Right. This is why you're who you are.
Yeah.
This is why you're coming to the studio.
Dude, all my friends are welders and car builders and AC guys and electricians, and they're fucking get-her-dones, man. These are, and I have friends that are professionals, that are doctors and lawyers and
Sure.
big entrepreneurs. But I've been at the lowest of low. From being a roofer and how am I going to pay my light bill, to pawning my amp to, make rent back in those days to where I am now. I don't take any of it for granted, and it lets me, I have a different perspective being in the band saying, hey, guys, I think your audience would love this because I was that guy on the other side of the barricade. And I feel that I have a pretty good ear to the ground of what everybody else is into and what they dig or what they might want to hear or expect, or I don't know. Nothing against those that just do music. I mean, good for them that they were able to always do what they loved, because I wasn't always able to do what I loved. But it's allowed me different experiences that I would have never had otherwise, and I love it. I could always earn a living another way and know that that's in my back pocket.
Wow. Todd LaTorre, lead singer of Queensryche, their latest album, Digital Noise Alliance. Tour starts coming up this
March 3rd.
March 3rd, and you're going to be in the Tampa St. Pete area April 16th. You'll be in Orlando, a couple of Florida shows, but
Janice will be a local hometown show for us.
North American tour, though, whole United States?
Just the U.S.
Just the U.S.
Yeah, no Canadian dates yet, nothing abroad for this tour. Hopefully we'll get to see you. And
without a doubt.
And
is it Queensryche.com?
Yep, Queensryche Official.
Queensryche Official.
I think it's Queensryche Official. And all of our socials, there's Facebook, Queensryche Official. All the tour dates are there. We have Marty Friedman as the direct support. We have a band called Trauma. That's the first one. That was the band that Cliff Burton, who joined Metallica before he joined, that was his band, a thrash band.
Wow.
So it's a 3-band package tour. The first headline tour supporting the new record, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So great talking to you. Great seeing you, and thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Congrats on your podcast. I know it's blowing up, and you've had some amazing guests, and thank you for having me and calling me, and we could come in your studio and do this.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, man. Todd LaTorre. If not for being the lead singer of the band Queensryche, he could have been an upholsterer. Seemed like he had a pretty successful business in upholstery before he, got into the band Queensryche. Always been into music. He mentioned that, it was high school. He was going to join the wrestling team, but he had to cut his hair. I think it was Dave Snake Sabo from the band Skid Row who had a similar story. He was a baseball player, had to cut his hair. It just wasn't going to happen, even though he had a promising career perhaps as a pitcher at the next level in baseball. Todd, don't know if he would have gone on to, become a professional wrestler because, he is about my size, but cut his hair, did not, that was not in the cards, went into music, became a drummer, a lot of local bands in the Tampa St. Pete area before kind of getting his first little taste, which was the lead singer of the band Crimson Glory, which, was signed to, MCA and Atlantic back in the day. And they definitely had a good thing going on. A smaller band, not a household name, but Crimson Glory was definitely a signed band and a working band that people knew of. And yes, getting that big break where he became the lead singer of the band Queensryche, and some of those hits like Jet City Woman and Silent Lucidity that you've known for years and years. Now this guy is the lead singer of this band, out on the road, touring constantly, world tours, the whole nine. And it happened to him later in life. So he was an insurance adjuster for like catastrophe stuff, hurricanes and fires and floods and stuff like that. I mean, this guy, he could have been anything, and he probably almost was. His big break came in his later 30s. And I think that's pretty awesome to hear. Like maybe there's a lot of you listening right now that you're waiting for your big break. I'm kind of waiting for my big break. I've had a few small breaks, along the way, but the big one, I'm kind of still waiting on. And, I'm Todd's age. I'm 47, he's 48, and he was 10 years earlier on his big break. But I don't know. There's hope for guys like us. You know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe our big break is right around the corner. Man, such an incredible story. His mom married a former big league baseball player and manager, Hal Lanier. So many similarities that me and Todd have as far as the baseball connection, with my brother-in-law playing in the big leagues and me getting to, go to the locker rooms and spring training with him and meeting all those guys like Pete Rose and Eric Davis and Barry Larkin. The list goes on when he played for the Cincinnati Reds. And his love of comedy. Todd loves comedy, and so do I. And I'm friends with a lot of the same comedians that he's friends with. And just so funny that, we've been friends for, a few years now and never really had this kind of in-depth conversation. And now I know a lot more about him and what he would have been if not for the lead singer of Queensryche. So once again, thanks for listening. If you could please rate, review, and subscribe, and check out some of the past guests from Celebrity Jobber, like Brian Johnson from AC/DC and John Oates from Hall & Oates, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, and so many more. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next week on another edition of Celebrity Jobber. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jeff Zito.